guys, Margaret Adele here, and I am back with my second ever video. I'll probably stop doing that at some point, but for right now, I had intended to use this video to talk about my reading list, or rather my reading challenge, and the readathon I'm doing this month, and all of that kind of got sidetracked by what is the most shocking moment I have ever read in a book, and I will get into that in a little bit. But first, what I mean when I say my reading challenge is I realized the other day, like late September, that I have a lot of books that I own, but I haven't read. And a lot. Like, I made a list. This is not all of them. This is just some of the books. These are all ebooks down here that I have not read, that I own. So these aren't library books that have to go back. These are totally mine, and I've never read them. So that's what I'm doing right now is my personal bout of self-discipline, as long as it lasts, is I am not going to either get a new book, a free ebook, a cheap used book, a best-selling from the Barnes & Noble, I can speak today, or even borrow from the library until I've read at least 5 books. And I'm currently on the 3rd, so I'm already working my way, and I've only been at this since October 1st. So I'm doing pretty well. I think I should be able to hit 1,000 pages read by the end of this weekend. So that's going pretty well. And I'm trying to mix it up when I do things. So I'll do a really light paperback, and then I'll tackle one of the more harder ones that I have, so that I'm never, reading all the nice light books first and then being caught with nothing but 600-page in-depth Old English books later on. So I started with a nice light paperback, and then I decided to move on to something a little bit meatier. And so I started reading Jude the Obscure. This is a book that was written in the 19th century, and you're not faulted for not knowing it. It's not really making any classics list. No one's going, oh yes, that Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. It's fantastic. And I didn't even get it myself. This was actually a Christmas gift. My younger sister gave this to me, which I thought was kind of weird. You know, I have a long-standing desire to read as many of the classics as I can, but this never came on my radar, and she doesn't really know classics and that kind of stuff, so it always confused me, what about this? And she said when she gave it to me on Christmas, read the back. And the back says, Jude the Obscure, which was received with such outrage that Thomas Hardy never wrote another novel. So this literally was received with so much hate that Thomas Hardy gave up writing entirely. Now, if you don't know who Thomas Hardy is, his most, the reason most people would know him today is probably for Tess de Uberville, or however you pronounce that, which was referenced in 50 Shades of Grey, kind of like how Claire de Lune is most well known today because of being in Twilight. But I'd never read anything by Thomas Hardy before, so I started reading it, and it reads basically like a 19th century morality tale, which is why I don't feel bad going through the entire thing, because I know probably no one's going to read this. And if you want to, well, it's been up for over a century now, you've had time. But it starts out with Jude, obviously, as a boy, and going through losing his father and having to live with his aunt, and dreaming of moving to this big city called Christminster, which is not an actual city. I believe the book said Thomas Hardy based it off of Oxford, I believe, but it does not actually exist in the UK. And he has all these dreams, but as a young man, he gets tricked into a marriage. The woman he's with claims she is pregnant, and therefore he marries her out of duty, and it does not go well. They are miserable together. They don't really love each other. No one's really happy, so they separate. They do not get a divorce, though. More things happen. He goes to Christminster, blah, blah, blah. That's not really the important part here. And like I said, it's a 19th century morality tale, so a lot of dry parts. And this was a fairly slow read for me because again, older English, and I always was dropping down to read all the footnotes. I love the footnotes. Thomas Hardy loved putting in a bunch of references to other books and plays and poetry. So they're always referencing something. That's why I no longer feel bad if I make modern references in my writing because people were doing that all the time back then. So he moves on and he ends up meeting his cousin, who's never met before, Sue Bridehead, who currently reigns as my least liked female romantic interest in any book ever. She's obnoxious. I'm not gonna lie, I don't see what he sees in her. She changes her mind every other day. She always seems to have courage over her convictions, but her convictions are never the same. So they fall in love, but she's married to someone else, actually gets married to someone else after they meet, because she assumes that he's just her cousin and that's all he wants to be to her. But no, he's already in love with her. Eventually, she leaves her husband for him. They get together and they have kids, but not just their kids. It turns out Jude's first marriage did actually have a baby come from it. They never tell you if it was the original pregnancy or if his first wife, Arabella, got pregnant during the short time they were actually living together. They never quite say that. But he basically gets a letter from his first wife being like, hey, there's this kid, he's yours, have him. And they call him Little Father Time. He doesn't even have a name for the most part. And this kid is very creepy. He'd be a horror movie kid in today's age because he's very much acts older than his age to the point where like nothing makes him laugh really. He just kind of quietly observes. So he's already a little bit weird. And they never quite tell you his age. Most of these books don't. I get the gist that he was about late elementary school, or what we in modern America would consider late elementary school. So like 10, 11, maybe 12 at the oldest, prepubescent, essentially. So people find out that Jude and Sue aren't actually married. They're just living together even after they get divorced from their previous spouses, and they could legally marry. Sue doesn't want to because the old marriages went so badly. So they said, okay, we'll just go and live together like we're husband and wife without actually being married. Fine. Except it was not. This is, of course, a very Victorian age. They're basically pushed out of everywhere. They're not respectable. Nobody wants them. They're constantly being kicked out of places, constantly on the road traveling, trying to find any source of income. And the youngest, or the oldest son, rather, the first son, now also called Jude after his father, although they still refer to him as Little Father Time, starts realizing that things are going wrong and that basically asks his mother, is it our fault? Meaning him and his siblings. And Sue reveals to him, essentially half-truths. Not the full truth, but enough to be like, yeah, nobody likes us. We're kind of kicked out of everywhere. And then reveals to him that she's pregnant again with another kid. And you can see where little Jude's mindset is, because he doesn't get the idea that a pregnancy could happen accidentally. He actually screams at Sue that it's her fault and how wicked she is to bring another kid into this when they don't have room as it is, which was a really creepy scene to read. Not as creepy as the one that follows. The next morning, Jude and Sue are essentially brainstorming where to go, having left the kids alone in the bedroom at the little house they're about to be kicked out of. And they go back to be like, okay, that one bright moment of, we know what we're doing next, which of course means that horrible things are about to happen. They walk into the room to find the kids are not in their beds. And my first thought was, oh, they've run away. No. Little Father Time, little Jude, has hung his siblings by the neck. And mind you, his siblings are like a toddler and a baby at this point. Like still in diapers. Hung them by the neck on coat pegs on the wall and then hung himself. In this 19th century morality tale, there is a double murder suicide committed by like a 10-year-old. And it's like 11:30 at night when I get to this part. I drop my phone and I drop the book. I pick up my phone, I text my sister, and I'm like, the hell did you give me? Where did that come from? And the back did say that the sad tale leads to one of the most shocking scenes in literature, but I didn't think it was that. Like, that is George R.R. Martin levels of horrible. And so I have to keep reading, and I kind of figure out how it ends. But essentially, I mean, well, it all kind of goes even more downhill from there. It's a tragedy. Flat out, worst case scenario tragedy. And basically, Sue sees it as karma. She sees it as Arabella's son killed her children as a sort of cosmic righting the wrong. She promptly miscarries the child she has, leaves Jude, go back to her old husband, who for some reason takes her back. Jude's old wife, now widowed from her second marriage, finds out that he's single, comes back, gets him drunk for 3 days so that he'll marry her again. Then he gets sick of a lung disease and dies. That's the end of this book. It is worst case scenario. Sue doesn't even come to Jude's mini funeral. There's 2 people at his funeral, his second wife and this widow character that is the only one who realizes that all of this is fucked up. Oh, I meant not to swear, but there it is. It is just hardcore. And I think maybe a lot of times in these days we tend to see all these classic books as being above that, but in actuality, there's a lot of really hardcore moments in a lot of 19th century books. Like, if you've never read the original Christmas Carol, which I have, I read it every year. It's really short and easy to read, but I love it. Scrooge is not your average bad guy. Like, some of the lines there, some of the ways that they're explained, the creepiness of it, I think we tend to clean out the uglier bits of those older books, when in reality they kept all the ugly bits in because that was part of the tale they were telling. What's interesting about this is why I call it a morality tale. According to the author, it wasn't necessarily against Jude and Sue for not being married. Thomas Hardy actually believes in divorce, or believed, he's not alive anymore, believed in divorce when the marriage was no longer amenable or was no longer working. He believed that a couple should be able to split up. And so in his mind, the real villain of the story was the actual state that forced them together in marriage. How Jude was essentially tricked into a marriage, and Sue only did it because she needed help in her time of need. And I'm not going to get too much into that because, like I said, it's a long, old English book. But I also, while I am married, I wear the ring on the quote-unquote wrong hand, but that's where I like to wear it. I also believe in divorce, in that, you know, you need to choose to be with your partner or choose to leave them, but it needs to be a choice, because having that choice makes it an act of love, where instead of an act of government forcing you to stay together. But I actually am happy I read the book. Will never probably give it as a reference to someone. Will never be like, oh, you have to read this book. Because it's not considered one of the great classics. I just wanted to read it because I wanted to read the book that infuriated everyone so badly and got so much hate that the author never wanted to write again. And by this point, mind you, he's already famous. Like, Thomas Hardy has already written many novels. He's already well known, and the hate was still so huge, he never wanted to touch it again. So this is just insane to me. But I thought I had to say something. I had to talk about this. And I'll probably do this again, talking about the books I've read. Now, mind you, if you ever hear for any book reviews from me, you're almost never going to get the latest, greatest YA release. Although, and do I have it here? I have it somewhere. I have read Tomi Adeyemi's Children of Blood and Bone, which I think is the most recent book I've read. And even then, I think it's already been out for like a year. I don't read a lot of new releases. Any books I read are usually at least a couple years out of date. So I'm never going to give you a book or a book review that's going to have spoilers, I guess, is the upside there. I'm also looking into, once I've read enough of the books off my list, to do a used book haul. Because all these booktubers always want to do book hauls with, like, you know, the latest, greatest releases, and they're all fancy and hardcovers. That kind of annoys me sometimes, because, like, they're all the same books being hauled. And I love used bookstores. They're the best. I want to do more with it. There's a lot of great bookstores around where I live. And I might even hit up like a Goodwill or whatever. And I really want to do a used book or a secondhand book haul, where it's like, here's a random book from the 80s. Here's the first and third and fifth of a series, because you can never get the full series in a used bookstore. Or that, you know, that once great YA novel that was going to become a classic but is now just clogging up an entire shelf because more people are selling it than buying it. But I've always wanted to do that, so that's definitely on my list. But like I said, I gotta stick to the list. I need to read the ones I did. It's also killing me that I can't get any more free ebooks off BookBub. I'm not even allowing myself that much. So I gotta get to reading. It's Saturday, so hopefully I can get a nice decent chunk of reading out of the way. My next video will talk about more in depth about what I'm gonna do for the readathon, what inspired me to do it, and that kind of thing. But if you liked this video, feel free to like it down below and subscribe. I'm hoping to post every Saturday, so stick around for that if you're looking forward to it. And other than that, have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow. I'll talk to you next time.